My daughter's fiancé demanded contribute $75,000 or there won't be a wedding at all. Drew Pemberton thought he was bullying some poor bank employee from Boston's North End. He had no idea that certain important papers with his family's name were sitting in files on my desk. I smiled when he insulted my family. I nodded gently when he gave his ultimatum, and then I made one phone call that would leave them homeless. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. My name is Antonio Moretti, and I've spent the last 28 years living what most people would call a lie. Every morning I wake up in my modest house on Hanover Street in Boston's North End, the same neighborhood where my grandfather sold vegetables from a pushcart after stepping off the boat from Sicily in 1942. I brew coffee in a $15 pot, read the Boston Globe at my second-hand kitchen table, then drive my 2018 Honda Civic to work. To anyone watching, I'm just another middle-aged guy trying to make ends meet. My neighbors see me taking out trash in my old Patriots t-shirt, shoveling snow shopping with coupons. When people ask what I do, I tell them I work at a bank, which is technically true. What I don't tell them is that I own that bank. Northeastern Community Financial started 28 years ago when I took a $15,000 loan from my Uncle Tony and opened a single storefront office in Medford. Today we have 47 branches across New England, $1.2 billion in assets, and employ over 800 people. The modest guy in the Honda Civic built something that would make most people's heads spin. But here's the thing about success in America. Once people know you have money, they treat you differently. They want something from you. They assume your kids got where they are because of your checkbook, not their brains. That's why my daughter Harper has no idea. As far as she knows, her old man works as a loan officer, drives a used car because that's all he can afford, and never quite made it out of the old neighborhood. When she graduated from Harvard Business School last spring, she hugged me with tears in her eyes and thanked me for all the sacrifices I'd made. She has no clue that the $280,000 for her MBA was less than what the bank earns in a typical Tuesday. I wanted her to know she earned every grade, every opportunity through her own merit. I wanted her to understand the value of hard work the same way my grandfather did. Money doesn't teach you character, struggle does. The irony is that by hiding my success, I accidentally created the perfect test for everyone around us. When people think you don't have power, they show you who they really are. They let their guard down. They say things they'd never say if they knew you could affect their lives. They reveal their true feelings about people like us, working-class Italian families from the old neighborhood. For years, this deception worked perfectly. Harper developed into a strong, independent woman who never took anything for granted. She worked 2 jobs through college, studied harder than anyone I knew, and built genuine relationships with people who liked her for who she was. But then she brought home Drew Pemberton, and that's when I learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is let people underestimate you. Little did I know that concealing my success would become a window into everyone's true character. It started 8 months ago when Harper brought Drew home on a crisp October evening. I was raking leaves in our small front yard when his BMW pulled up to the curb. Even before he stepped out, I could see him taking in the neighborhood. The narrow row houses, the Italian flags hanging from windows, Mrs. DeMarco's plastic lawn ornaments next door. His expression reminded me of someone who'd taken a wrong turn and ended up in the wrong part of town. "Dad, this is Drew," Harper said, practically glowing with excitement. She'd been talking about this guy for weeks. Harvard law, prestigious family, everything she thought she wanted. Drew extended a manicured hand. "Mr. Moretti, pleasure to meet you." His handshake was firm but brief, like he was checking off a box. "Harper's told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, wiping my hands on my work jeans. His smile faltered slightly. "Of course. She mentioned you work in banking." "That's right." "Which institution?" The question came out carefully, like he was trying to place me in some hierarchy he understood. "Northeastern Community," I said simply. Relief flickered across his face. Not one of the big players. Nothing that would complicate his social standing. By month 3, the subtle digs had become routine. At a dinner party in their Beacon Hill mansion, a gorgeous brownstone that unbeknownst to them carried a mortgage I'd personally approved, Drew's mother, Catherine, made her feelings crystal clear. "Antonio works in community banking." She explained to her dinner guests the way you might describe someone's unfortunate medical condition. It's wonderful how these smaller institutions serve their specific communities. The emphasis on communities wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Neither was the way she pronounced Antonio, like it was foreign to her tongue. The North End has such character, added one of her friends, a woman dripping in pearls. All those ethnic restaurants and little shops. So authentic. Harper's cheeks burned red, but she said nothing. I filed it away. Month 5 brought a charity fundraiser at the country club. Drew introduced me to his law firm colleagues as us, Harper's father, salt of the earth type, you know. When the conversation turned to the event's catering, someone mentioned the Italian place they'd considered. Oh, you mean for staff meals? Catherine laughed. We'd need something more, elevated for our guests. Though I'm sure Antonio knows all about those neighborhood places. More mental notes. By month 6, they'd stop pretending to be polite. At Harper's birthday dinner, Drew's father, Reginald, held court about maintaining standards in their social circle. It's not about money, he declared, gesturing with his wine glass. It's about understanding where you belong. Some people are comfortable with paper plates and folding chairs. Others expect more. He looked directly at me when he said it. Dad, Harper whispered, but I just smiled and nodded. The breaking point came last month at another family gathering. Drew was discussing wedding venues with his cousins, speaking as if I wasn't sitting right there. The challenge is managing expectations, he said. Harper's family means well, but they don't understand the kind of event we need. Her father probably makes, $65,000 at some community bank. Asking him to contribute to something at the Four Seasons would be unrealistic. His cousin nodded sympathetically. Maybe somewhere more appropriate. There are lovely venues in East Boston, where they thought people like us belonged. I watched Harper's face crumble. For 8 months she'd been trying to fit into their world, apologizing for her background, explaining away our modest lifestyle. She was shrinking herself to make them comfortable, and they were still treating us like charity cases they were graciously tolerating. That night, driving home through the North End, past the bakery where my grandfather had bought bread for 50 years, past the church where 3 generations of Morettis had been baptized, I made a decision. 8 months of evidence, time to see what they really wanted. Last week, everything came to a head during what should have been simple wedding planning. I'd driven to Harper and Drew's Cambridge apartment, expecting to discuss flowers and music. Instead, I walked into what felt like a business negotiation where I was clearly the junior partner. Drew had obviously been pacing. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened like he'd been preparing for battle. Antonio, thanks for coming, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. We need to discuss some logistics. Harper sat curled in the corner of their expensive sofa, looking smaller than I had seen her since she was 12. We've been looking at venues. Drew continued, pulling out a thick folder. There are really only 2 options that make sense. He spread materials across their glass coffee table like evidence in court. On one side, a simple brochure for the North End Community Center. On the other, glossy photos of the Boston Harbor Hotel's ballroom. The community center is charming. Drew said the word dripping with condescension. But we need to think about our guest list. Partners from my law firm family. Friends, business associates. These are people who expect a certain level of sophistication. How much? I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. The Harbor Hotel runs about $75,000 for the kind of reception we're planning. He said it casually, like mentioning the weather. Harper finally spoke up. Drew, we talked about this. That's not reasonable. Sweetheart, I'm trying to be realistic here. His voice took on that patronizing tone I'd heard him use with waiters. Your father works hard, but community banking has its limitations. I'm not asking him to cover everything. Just a fair contribution. Fair. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. My family is handling the majority of expenses. We're just asking for your portion. Your portion. Like we were splitting a dinner check. And if we can't manage that amount, I asked. Drew's mask slipped. Then we'd need to reconsider our timeline. Maybe postpone until we can find something more financially feasible. The threat hung in the air. $75,000 or no wedding. Harper's face went pale. Drew, you're putting my father in an impossible position. I'm being practical about what kind of wedding represents both families appropriately. He shot back. Harper, your father probably makes, $65,000 a year. Asking him to contribute this much is already generous. There it was. The assumption lurking beneath every conversation for 8 months. The belief that I was some small-time employee who should be grateful they were including us. But what struck me most was watching my daughter's reaction. Instead of shrinking back, Harper sat up straighter. That's enough. she said quietly. You're talking about my family like we're some charity case you're managing. Drew's eyes flashed with irritation. I'm talking about reality, Harper. Wedding venues cost money. Real money. Not everyone can afford the lifestyle we're planning. The lifestyle you're planning, she corrected. For the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of the strong woman I'd raised, the one who'd fought for every grade at Harvard. Antonio? Drew turned back to me, his voice businesslike. I'm sure you understand the realities here. This is about what makes sense for everyone involved. I looked at this entitled young man who thought he was doing us a favor, who assumed my worth based on my zip code and car, who had no idea his family's financial future was sitting in a file cabinet in my office. I understand business better than you think, I said quietly. Give me 48 hours. The next morning I made some phone calls that would change everything. Instead of my usual drive to the modest northeastern community branch where people thought I worked, I headed downtown to Federal Street. The 40-story glass tower housing our corporate headquarters gleamed in the October sunlight, its lobby filled with the quiet hum of serious money being managed. Good morning, Mr. Moretti. The security guard nodded as I swiped my executive access card. 28 years, and it still felt surreal, walking past marble walls lined with awards. Community Bank of the Year, Small Business, Champion Immigrant, Entrepreneur of the Decade. My corner office on the 38th floor offered a perfect view of Boston Harbor. The mahogany desk had been a gift from the mayor. On the wall hung my Harvard Business School diploma, the one Harper didn't know I had earned through night classes while building the bank. Maria, could you come in? I called to my vice president of operations. Maria Santos had been with me 15 years, starting as a teller and working her way up through pure determination. She understood building something from nothing. What's on your mind, Antonio? She asked, settling into the leather chair. I need a full compliance review on the Pemberton family accounts. Her eyebrows went up. Any particular reason? Character clause evaluation. I want everything. Loan terms, payment history, cosigners. Maria pulled out her tablet. Pemberton. Beacon Hill address. That's them. Primary mortgage holder is Reginald Pemberton III. $2.8 million originated in 2019. Current balance $2.4 million. She paused. Antonio, this is substantial. Is there a problem? Potentially. What does our character clause say about borrower conduct? Standard provisions about maintaining community standards consistent with bank values. Discrimination, harassment behavior reflecting poorly on our reputation. She looked up. Are we talking violation? 8 months of documented incidents. Multiple witnesses. Maria's expression grew serious. She'd grown up in East Boston and knew exactly what discrimination I meant. What timeline? Legal consultation this afternoon. Full review of our options. Antonio, she said carefully, calling a loan this size. It'll make waves. Some waves need making. 2 hours later, I sat in our conference room with Maria and Chief Legal Counsel, David Kim. The Pemberton file lay open between us, along with character clause precedents. The language is clear, David said. Borrowers agreed to conduct themselves consistent with bank community values. Discrimination based on national origin, economic status, or ethnic background constitutes grounds for immediate review. Documentation requirement, I asked. Multiple incidents, credible witnesses, clear pattern. He looked at me directly. Can you provide that? I thought about 8 months of subtle insults, condescending remarks, outright mockery. Dinner parties where they'd discussed us like we weren't there. Assumptions about our intelligence, our worth, our place. More than enough. Then we have grounds for loan acceleration under Section 12. 30-day notice, full balance due upon breach of community standards. Maria whistled softly. $2.4 million in 30 days. It's not about money, I said. It's about accountability. David nodded. I'll prepare documentation. When do you want to proceed? I thought about Harper shrinking herself to fit into a world that would never accept her. About Drew's assumption that 75,000 was impossible for people like us. About every immigrant family told to know their place. Schedule the appropriate meetings. It's time for accountability. 2 days later, I was ready to give Drew my answer. The 48 hours had passed quickly, filled with conversations that reminded me why this mattered. Walking through the North End that Friday morning, I stopped at Bova's Bakery, where my grandfather had bought bread every Sunday after Mass. Tony Bova, Jr. was behind the counter just like his father 30 years ago. Antonio. The usual, he called out, reaching for my favorite Italian bread. As he wrapped it up, I mentioned I might be in the news soon. Good news or bad news? Tony grinned. Depends on your perspective. His expression grew serious. My cousin Mario had something similar last year. Rich family in Wellesley treated him like dirt when dating their daughter. Made comments about his kind, thinking they could buy their way into society. Tony shook his head. Sometimes people need to learn there are consequences. The support wasn't just from the neighborhood. At the bank, word had quietly spread among senior staff. During our Friday leadership meeting, Maria shared feedback. Antonio, I've never seen the team more unified, she said. When people heard we were taking action against discrimination, the response was overwhelming. Sarah in HR said it perfectly. She's proud to work for a bank that stands by its values. David Kim arrived with final documentation. Everything's prepared, he reported. Character clause violations thoroughly documented. We have witness statements, clear timeline of escalating behavior, solid legal grounds. Any second thoughts? I asked. None. This is exactly what these provisions were designed for. That afternoon, Harper called. She'd been doing her own thinking. Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been researching the Pemberton family. Oh, did you know Drew's grandfather made his fortune in housing development? Specifically, he created restricted communities in the 1950s. Places where Italian and Irish families weren't allowed to buy homes. The irony wasn't lost on me. And now his grandson is dating an Italian girl from the North End. It gets worse. I found newspaper articles about discrimination lawsuits against their construction company. Dad, this family has a history of thinking they're better than people like us. I could hear strength returning to her voice, confidence that had been slowly eroded over 8 months. What are you thinking, sweetheart? I'm thinking I've been trying so hard to fit into their world that I forgot who I am. You raised me to be proud of our family, our neighborhood, our heritage. Drew wants me to apologize for all of that. And now I'm wondering why I ever thought their approval was worth having. That evening I sat on my front steps watching the neighborhood come alive. Mrs. DeMarco watering her tomatoes plants. The Rossi kids playing stickball. 3 generations of families who'd built lives here who deserved respect regardless of their bank accounts. My phone buzzed with a text from Drew. Antonio, hoping to hear from you soon about our discussion. Time is running short for the venue booking. I looked at the message then, at the neighborhood around me, at the community that had supported my family for 3 generations, at the values my grandfather had taught about dignity and respect. I typed back, I'll have an answer for you tomorrow. Harper had called one more time that evening. Dad, whatever you decide, I trust your judgment. Tomorrow Drew gets his answer. The Boston Harbor Country Club had never seen anything like what happened next. Saturday evening arrived with crisp October air. I'd received Drew's text with the address and dress code reminder. Jacket required, as if I might not understand proper etiquette. I understood more than they knew. At 7:30, I pulled my Honda into the valet circle behind Mercedes and BMWs. The young valet looked at my car with disdain, but took the keys professionally. Inside the club was everything I'd expected. Dark mahogany crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of stern-faced men. The kind of place where membership was inherited, not earned. I found the Pemberton celebration in the main dining room. About 40 guests mingled around cocktail tables, their voices carrying that tone of people who believed their opinions mattered more than others. Antonio Drew called out, waving me over. Everyone, this is Harper's father, Antonio Moretti. He works in community banking. The introductions began. Reginald Pemberton III, silver-haired and imperious. Catherine Pemberton, whose smile never reached her eyes. Various professionals who looked at me like an interesting specimen. Community banking mused one of Drew's law partners. That must be challenging in today's market. We manage, I said simply. And I imagine the clientele is quite different, added Catherine. All those language barriers, different cultural expectations. A few people chuckled. I smiled and nodded. Antonio's been understanding about wedding arrangements, Drew announced. We're still working through financial logistics. The venue situation, said Catherine's friend, dripping in jewelry. There's something to be said for authentic neighborhood celebrations. More polite laughter, code for cheap and beneath our standards. The important thing, Reginald declared, raising his scotch, is that both families contribute what they can. Not everyone can afford the same sophistication. That's when I saw Maria Santos enter the dining room. She moved with quiet confidence, carrying a leather portfolio that anyone in serious business would recognize. Her tailored suit immediately caught attention. Excuse me, she said, approaching our group. "I'm looking for Antonio Moretti." "That's me. Mr. Moretti, I'm Maria Santos, Vice President of Operations. I have those documents you requested." "Documents?" Joe asked, confusion creeping in. "The Pemberton account review," Maria said, opening her portfolio. "We've completed the compliance evaluation you ordered." "Who exactly are you?" Catherine interrupted. "Maria Santos, Vice President of Operations at Northeastern Community Bank." "That's where Antonio works," Reginald said slowly. Maria looked at me, then back at the group. Actually, Antonio doesn't work at Northeastern Community Bank." The room went dead quiet. "He founded it. He's the chief executive officer and majority owner." 40 of Boston's most privileged citizens stood frozen champagne glasses halfway to their lips, confident smiles melting like snow. What Drew's voice barely a whisper. "Northeastern Community Bank," Maria continued pulling out documents. "Founded 28 years ago by Antonio Moretti. 47 branches, $1.2 billion in assets." She handed me a formal notice. "The Pemberton family mortgage $2.4 million has been called for immediate acceleration due to character clause violations." "Character clause violations." Reginald's face went white. 8 months of documented discriminatory behavior," I said. "Comments about ethnic neighborhoods, assumptions about cultural inferiority, suggestions that immigrant families should know their place." I looked around the room at these people who had spent the evening treating me like an amusing charity case. "You assumed I was powerless because I dress simply and drive an old car. You thought you could mock my family, my heritage, my neighborhood, because you believed I couldn't affect your lives." I paused. "You were mistaken." The silence stretched. Then Harper stepped forward, pulled the engagement ring from her finger, and placed it on the nearest table. "I can't marry someone who doesn't respect my family." The next 3 weeks changed everything for both families. By Monday morning, word of what happened at the Boston Harbor Country Club had spread through the city's financial district like wildfire. My phone started ringing before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. "Antonio, it's Judge Patricia Gonzalez," came the first call. "I heard about Saturday night, about time someone stood up to that behavior." The calls kept coming. Business leaders, community organizers, bank executives. In a city built by immigrants, the story of an Italian-American banker taking down old money discrimination resonated with many people. The Boston Globe ran the story. Wednesday local bank. CEO takes stand against discrimination. The article detailed the character clause provisions and documented discriminatory behavior. They'd interviewed country club members who admitted witnessing the Pemberton family's comments, but saying nothing. The Pemberton family's response was swift and predictable. Reginald hired Boston's most expensive law firm to challenge the mortgage acceleration. Their lawyers claimed the character clause was discriminatory itself, that personal opinions couldn't be grounds for financial action. David Kim had anticipated this. "They're arguing rich people should be exempt from basic decency requirements," he told me. "It won't work." He was right. Suffolk County Superior Court upheld our action within 10 days. Judge Martinez's ruling was pointed. Character clauses exist precisely to ensure financial institutions can maintain community standards. The defendant's documented discriminatory behavior clearly violates these provisions. The Pemberton house went on market immediately. A beautiful Beacon Hill brownstone forced sale priced to move quickly. It sold within a week to a tech entrepreneur who'd grown up in Southie, another neighborhood kid who'd made good. Drew's law firm partnership was quietly dissolved. "Conduct incompatible with firm values," was the official statement. Word around legal circles was that several major clients had made clear they wouldn't work with someone publicly exposed for discriminatory behavior. But the most significant change was in Harper. 3 days after the confrontation, she showed up at my office unannounced. Maria buzzed me, "Your daughter's here, and she looks different." She did look different. Confident, proud, like the weight of trying to be someone else had finally lifted. "Dad, I want to work here," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Not because you're my father, but because I believe in what this bank stands for." "What about your consulting plans?" "Those were Drew's plans. He wanted me in corporate consulting because it sounded impressive to his friends. I want to do community development lending. I want to help families like ours build something real." That afternoon, she gave an interview to Channel 5 News. Standing outside our North End branch, she spoke with clarity and strength I hadn't seen in months. "My father taught me that respect isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn through your actions," she told the reporter. For 8 months, I tried to apologize for who we are, where we come from, what we've built. I'm done apologizing. The interview went viral. Done apologizing started trending on social media, with thousands sharing their own discrimination stories, and the moment they decided to stop shrinking themselves to fit others' expectations. Other banks started calling, asking about our character clause language. 3 New York institutions wanted to implement similar provisions. The American Bankers Association invited me to speak at their annual conference about values-based lending, but the call that meant most came from Tony Bova Jr. at the bakery. I'm Antonio, that cousin I mentioned, the one with trouble with the rich Wellesley family he called yesterday. Said seeing what you did gave him courage to file a discrimination complaint with the state. Sometimes people just need to see someone else willing to fight back. 3 weeks after that Saturday night, I sat in my office looking over the North End. The neighborhood looked the same. Narrow streets, close-packed houses, generational families. But something had shifted, a sense that we didn't have to accept being treated as less than, that we could demand the respect we'd always deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. Dad, I've been thinking. Maybe we should start a scholarship fund. 3 months later, something beautiful emerged from the confrontation. The North End Community Center had never hosted an event quite like this one. On a crisp January morning, the gymnasium was packed with families. Students and community leaders all gathered to witness what Antonio Moretti had built from a moment of injustice. When my father took his stand 3 months ago, Harper said from the small stage, her voice carrying clearly through the room, people asked if it was worth it, worth risking everything to make a point about respect. She gestured to the 10 young people sitting in the front row, the first recipients of the Moretti Family Education Fund. Maria Santos, now the fund's administrator, had spent weeks reviewing applications from immigrant families across New England. Today I think we have our answer. Antonio watched from the side of the stage as his daughter introduced each scholarship recipient. There was Ahmed Hassan, whose Syrian refugee parents ran a small grocery store in Revere, working 16-hour days to support his engineering studies. Sofia Morales, whose mother cleaned office buildings at night while studying English during the day, all to support her daughter's pre-med dreams. Tommy Nguyen, a first-generation Vietnamese American studying computer science at MIT, whose father had arrived in Boston with nothing but a suitcase and determination. Each story was different, but they all shared something fundamental. Families who'd come to America with nothing but hope-building better lives one generation at a time, just like the Morettis had done decades earlier. The fund represents more than financial assistance. Harper continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. It's a statement that in America, your worth isn't determined by your zip code, your accent, or how long your family has been here. It's determined by your character and your willingness to work for something better. The $500,000 had come from the sale of some bank stock Antonio had been holding. Not enough to change his lifestyle, but enough to change 10 lives completely. Other community leaders had taken notice. The Italian American Club had pledged matching funds for next year. 3 local businesses had committed to internship programs. 2 other banks had started their own immigrant scholarship initiatives. The announcement had sparked something larger, a regional movement toward supporting first-generation students. After the ceremony, Antonio found himself in conversation with Father Murphy from St. Leonard's Church, the same priest who'd baptized Harper 25 years earlier. You know, Antonio, I've been in this neighborhood for 40 years. The priest said, his Irish accent still thick after decades in Boston. I've seen a lot of families struggle with the choice between assimilation and authenticity. What you and Harper did, standing up for who you are instead of apologizing for it, that's going to inspire people for years to come. Later that evening, Antonio and Harper walked through the North End together, past the bakeries and restaurants, where 3 generations of their family had shopped. The neighborhood looked the same as always, but something fundamental had changed. There was a sense of pride in the air, a feeling that being from here was something to celebrate, not explain away. Dad, Harper said as they paused outside the old family church, I've been thinking about what Drew used to say, about people knowing their place. What about it? I think he was right. People should know their place. She smiled, her breath visible in the cold air. My place is here with our community, helping families build the same kind of success you built. not apologizing for where I come from, but using it as the foundation for where I'm going. Antonio felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the January cold. This was what he'd hoped for when he'd first decided to hide his wealth from Harper. Not that she'd struggle, but that she'd understand the value of struggle. That she'd know success meant nothing if you forgot the people who helped you achieve it. "I'm proud of the woman you've become," he said simply. "I learned from the best." As I reflect on this journey from my office overlooking the North End, I'm reminded that God has a way of turning our deepest challenges into our greatest lessons. 6 months ago, I was just another father trying to teach his daughter that character matters more than cash. I never imagined it would become one of those betrayal stories that changes everything, not just for us, but for countless families who face similar discrimination. The view from my window hasn't changed. Same narrow streets, same close-knit families, same neighborhood bakeries, where 4 generations of Morettis have bought their Sunday bread. But something fundamental has shifted in how we see ourselves. My grandfather used to tell me that God tests us not with what we can handle, but with what we're willing to stand up for. Those grandpa stories he shared about arriving in America with nothing but faith and determination weren't just family history. They were preparation for moments like this when you have to choose between comfort and courage. The letters keep pouring in from across the country. Families sharing their own betrayal stories, moments when people they trusted revealed their true prejudices. Maria from Phoenix, whose law firm colleagues assumed she was a paralegal despite her Harvard law degree. David from Detroit, whose engineering expertise was questioned because of his Polish surname. Sarah from Miami, whose medical practice lost patients when they discovered her Haitian heritage.